I picked up Julian from basketball practice just like I always did. The sun hadn't quite dipped yet, and the spring air had that familiar buzz, kids yelling across the court, parents honking, coaches barking out last-minute instructions. Julian spotted me and waved, all sweat and grins, his gym bag swinging off one shoulder like he owned the world. He'd been riding high since making the new team, and honestly, watching him light up like that, it made every long day at the shop worth it. He climbed into the passenger seat and barely sat down before holding out my phone. "Uncle Theo texted you," he said, unbothered, reaching for the Gatorade I left for him. I unlocked the screen without thinking, just expecting something trivial, maybe a family dinner update, or one of those memes Theo loved sending that never landed. But it wasn't that. It was a photo of Julian, mid-jump, taking a shot on the court, caught beautifully in motion, and the caption below: "Too short for basketball, just that." 7 words, cold, clinical, cutting. At first, I didn't even process it. My thumb hovered over the screen. My brain stalled. I blinked, read it again, and then it hit me. Not just the insult, but where it was posted. Our family group chat. Everyone had seen it. My husband, his parents, his sisters, and no one had said a damn thing. The thing about Theo was he never insulted you outright. He chipped away, slowly, like termites under a polished floor. I stared at that message longer than I care to admit, trying to force it to be something it wasn't. Maybe he meant it as a joke. Maybe it was harmless. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. With Theo, it never was. What burned wasn't just the message, it was the silence around it. The fact that nobody, none of them, stood up for Julian. Not a single word of defense. Not even a nervous emoji to soften it. It was just left there, hanging. I looked at Julian, humming along to whatever song was on the radio, completely unaware. I deleted the message without saying anything. I couldn't let him see that. Not yet. Not while he still believed people in his own family cheered for him. The rest of the drive was a blur. His chatter about practice, the snacks the coach brought, who made the most ridiculous half-court shot. I nodded, added the occasional, "Yeah?" and "That's awesome," while my insides knotted tighter. Because it wasn't just a text. It was a slap. Not at me, but at my son. And that made it different. At home, while Julian showered, I sat on the edge of the bed and called Brian at work. He picked up like he always did, half distracted, already annoyed. "What's up? Did you see what Theo sent?" Long pause. "What? The basketball thing? You're not seriously upset about that?" I didn't answer right away. I waited for something else. Some sign he understood. "It's not that serious," he continued. "You're overreacting. It was a dumb joke. Let it go. Let it go." Those 3 words churned in my stomach. I had let it go when Theo called my side of the family white trash with a good hair day. I let it go when he accidentally left me off that group vacation invite. I let it go when he made remarks about how I must have trapped Brian because guys like him don't usually marry down. But this wasn't me he went after. It was Julian. And Brian's voice, casual, dismissive, felt like a confirmation of something I hadn't wanted to admit. I'd been gaslit into silence for years. Not this time. Theo wasn't just Brian's brother. He worked for me. I ran a small business selling customized wood signs online, craft fairs, Etsy, the works, and I'd hired him part-time to help with deliveries and logistics. So I opened our shared Google Sheet, found the upcoming jobs he was assigned to, and removed his name. Then I opened my texts and typed the shortest message I'd ever sent him. "Effective immediately, you're no longer contracted for services. I'll mail your last payment." Sent. My hands didn't shake out of fear. They shook because of adrenaline. I expected silence. Instead, the group chat lit up. Brian's mother. "Is this really necessary?" His sister. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." Theo, of course, had the last word. Wow, someone can't take a joke. I didn't reply. I opened my laptop and began drafting the formal termination email, attached the recent invoices, listed out the pay, kept it sterile, clean, professional. I stared at the blinking cursor, feeling something unfamiliar bloom in my chest. Not just rage, not even grief. It was resolve. I wasn't just protecting Julian anymore. I was drawing the line, and maybe reclaiming something I'd let slip away in all the years I bit my tongue. Still, I didn't expect what came next, because when betrayal finally knocks, it doesn't always come through the front door. Sometimes it climbs into bed beside you. We didn't cancel dinner. Brian insisted we show up like always, the first Sunday of the month, 6 p.m. sharp at his parents' house. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, overcooked green beans, a table full of people pretending they're closer than they are. I didn't argue. I knew better than to challenge tradition head on. Julian sat beside me in the back seat, unusually quiet. Not sulking, not upset, just still. He'd sensed something, kids always do. They might not understand every detail, but tension, that they breathe in like secondhand smoke. Brian talked on the way there about the Sixers, about work, about the neighbor's new fence, anything but what happened. Like nothing had cracked. Like he hadn't just told me to let it go when his brother mocked our child in front of the whole damn family. Theo was already there, of course, standing by the kitchen island with a beer in hand, grinning like he owned the place. He slapped Brian's back when we walked in, cracked a joke about Brian's tie. They laughed, like nothing was broken. Julian walked ahead into the living room. I followed slower, unsure where to put my eyes, my hands. The air felt thick with the kind of silence people build entire families on. Dinner was served by 6:15. I chewed slowly, the roast tasteless in my mouth. Across the table, Theo talked about a new client. Brian nodded, chimed in. His mother passed the butter like we were all at peace. No one asked me how work was. No one looked Julian in the eye. I stared at my plate, swallowed a piece of potato I barely chewed. Is this the family I married into? Or were they always like this, and I just kept explaining it away? I took a breath and spoke. So, Julian's picture got quite the commentary in the group chat earlier. Silence. Theo smirked. Didn't even pause chewing. Brian didn't miss a beat. Let's not ruin dinner, okay? Just like that. Theo wiped his mouth with his napkin, shrugged. Didn't think it'd blow up. It was just... What? A comment. No apology. Not even a fake one. My sister-in-law, seated next to him, quickly changed the subject. Has anyone tried that new Italian place downtown? I've heard mixed reviews. And just like that, the room shifted back into safe conversation. The unspoken rule was clear. Stay silent, stay peaceful. But peace isn't the absence of noise. Sometimes it's just a quiet betrayal. I didn't say another word. I just watched them all. Their practiced rhythm, their selective empathy, how easily they rallied around comfort over truth. I wasn't outnumbered. I was outloyaled. My mind went back. Memories like old receipts I'd shoved in drawers. The birthday party Theo forgot. The Christmas gifts that never quite made sense for me but were spot on for everyone else. The time his mother made a joke about how I married up, and everyone laughed. I used to explain it away. Tonight I collected. Somewhere in the middle of dessert, while they passed around decaf and nodded at some story about the neighbor's dog, I glanced at Julian. He was pushing whipped cream around his plate with a spoon. I leaned over, low enough so only he could hear. You're not too short for anything, I whispered. He looked at me. Didn't say anything, but he smiled, small, grateful, like I'd just given him something only he needed. That was enough. I didn't argue again that night. I didn't make a scene. They'd expect that. I left their house like a woman still playing by the rules. But something had shifted. Years ago, in a similar moment, I apologized just to make things smooth. I remembered that night, how it felt to say sorry when I didn't mean it, to keep things easy for everyone else while quietly resenting myself. Not again. This time, I didn't owe anyone quiet. This is how women disappear in their own families. Not all at once. Little by little. Bite by bite. Back home, Julian went straight to his room. I changed into sweats, washed the day off my face, and sat on the edge of the bed. The text came at 9:43. Theo. No hard feelings, right? He's just a kid. No greeting, no context, just that. I stared at the screen, expressionless, tapped once, screenshot, saved. Then a second message followed, meant for Brian, clearly. She'll get over it. She always does. No name, no emojis, just that sentence. And that was it. That was the moment silence died. I didn't reply. I opened my laptop, created a folder, labeled it with the date. I began compiling, not for revenge, not for drama, but for clarity. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about boundaries. About how far I'd let people cross before finally telling them where the line was, and they weren't going to see it coming. I hadn't slept for 2 nights straight. Not properly, anyway. I'd lie there, eyes wide open in the dark, waiting for sleep like it owed me something. But it didn't come. It just left me alone with that text, that damn dinner, that laugh from Theo across the table, like everything was fine. Like mocking my son was some inside joke I was too uptight to get. I replayed it all, over and over. The looks, the silence, the shrugs. I'd trained myself to ignore the little jabs over the years, but now they played back like surveillance footage I should have watched more closely. Funny how you can tell yourself it's not a big deal, until it is. The problem wasn't just the text, it was everything that came before it. All those other moments I let slide. That's what kept me awake. Not what they did, but what I didn't do. You ever notice how silence becomes deafening when you're the only one who hears the wrong? I whispered that to myself around 3:17 a.m., staring at the ceiling like it might answer back. That night, something inside shifted. I'd spent too long underreacting, thinking if I stayed calm enough, things would stay fair. That if I didn't make noise, I'd be spared the worst of it. But I'd been wrong. So I got up, slipped into my robe, tiptoed out of the bedroom, careful not to wake Julian. Brian had fallen asleep on the couch again, TV still on, remote limp in his hand like a dropped weapon. I didn't wake him. I walked into my office, shut the door, and turned on the lamp. Its soft glow hit the papers on my desk like a spotlight. Then I started digging. Old emails, shared documents, group texts, digital cobwebs people forget are still alive. It wasn't long before I found something, an invoice from Theo, billed to my small business, signed off by Brian. The date hit me. Last summer. I'd flagged it back then. Remembered raising an eyebrow at the charge, something about duplicate hours on 2 jobs. I'd brought it up to Brian. He brushed me off, said I was being too detail-focused. $1,200, gone. Just like that. I printed the invoice, laid it on the desk. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt clear. Then I created a folder. Named it, Protect Julian. It started with screenshots, texts, comments, voice notes, but quickly turned into something bigger. A record, a story, one they couldn't rewrite. If they won't protect him, I will, I whispered, and I won't need anyone's permission to do it. Later that morning, I was packing Julian's lunch when he walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Mom?" he asked, voice low. "Did I do something wrong?" That question crushed something inside me. I felt it give way like soft wood under weight. "No," I said, kneeling down to his level. "No, baby." "You didn't do anything wrong." He looked unsure. Kids are smart. He'd seen Brian and me barely talk since the dinner. He'd heard the quiet. "Sometimes adults lie with silence," I said gently. "But not you and me, okay?" He nodded, slowly. After I dropped him off at school, I sat in the driveway for 10 minutes. Not crying, not lost, just making a decision. By the time I walked into the house, I already knew my first move. I opened my laptop and revoked Theo's access to all the shared business files. No warning, just done. And that evening, I sat across from Brian at the dining table. I waited until he finished reading his email, probably the alert about Theo's removed credentials. Then I spoke. "You need to decide," I said. "Are you Julian's father first or Theo's brother?" He stared at me, like I'd asked something impossible. "You're being dramatic," he muttered. "No," I said. "I'm being clear." He stood up, rattling his chair. "God, you're always emotional. I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I just said, "From now on, emotional clarity is my superpower." He didn't reply. He just stormed off, letting the door slam behind him. I waited until the echo died, then turned back to my computer. I wasn't crying. I was archiving. Steady hand. Clear eyes. And that night, as I backed up everything to an external drive, I didn't feel lonely. I felt ready. It had been 2 months since Theo's firing. The dust didn't settle overnight, but something in me had. Summer was on its way out, the days still warm, but nights getting shorter. The company had started reshuffling teams, and to my surprise, they asked me to head a new equity task force. No gimmicks, no diversity panel fluff. Real strategy, real decisions. I said yes. Around the neighborhood, I started hearing different things. People I hadn't spoken to much before stopped me during school drop-offs, saying they'd seen the news, heard about the meeting, and, quietly, thanked me. Julian's school counselor even invited me to speak at a parents' night next month. Not about business, about resilience. It was strange at first, being seen like that. Julian. Julian felt lighter. I didn't need to ask him. I could see it in the way he moved. His shoulders no longer folded forward, his eyes no longer darting toward Theo's old truck on the street. He didn't start every sentence with, "I'm sorry." I started journaling every night, not for a memoir, not for revenge, but to remember who I'd been, who I was becoming. One entry read, "You don't just rebuild, you reinvent." He didn't care if anyone watched him play anymore. He signed up for the school's off-season basketball training, didn't say a word about it, just showed me the email confirmation. I took a day off and sat way in the back of the gym for one of the scrimmages. No clapping, no expectations, just watching. He didn't shoot once, just ran, passed, called out screens, helped a kid who fell. The coach came over after and said, "He's the smartest reader of the floor I've seen at his age." Julian walked off court drenched, hair stuck to his forehead, pride in his posture. He caught my eye and gave a quick nod. He didn't need words. That nod said everything. One afternoon, an email came from Theo. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a full minute. "I'd like to apologize," it said. "Clear the air." I didn't respond immediately. I let the weight of it sit in my chest for a while. Then I typed back, "There's nothing left to explain." No anger, just finality. That door had already closed. And this time, I wasn't checking if the latch held. Brian tried once too, left a voicemail. I didn't play it, just swiped left, deleted. Not out of bitterness, out of peace. I didn't need their words to validate my closure. I'd already earned it. One Saturday morning, I walked out to the backyard, the same cracked concrete where Julian used to practice free throws. The old net was shredded. Paint lines were almost gone. I swept it clean, rolled fresh paint across the court, nailed a new hoop in. Then I sent out a group text to the neighbors and said, "Kids welcome, snacks provided." By 2 p.m., we had 12 kids laughing, shouting, running wild across the driveway. I passed out popsicles and water bottles while Julian refereed the little ones like a pro. It wasn't about basketball anymore. It was about building a space where kids could feel safe to miss shots, to try again, to grow. My story was never about revenge. I see that now. It was about reclaiming space, emotionally, physically, even spiritually, creating space where no one's voice gets erased. Later that night, after the last kid had been picked up, I sat by the window with a pen and paper. I didn't plan to send the letter, I just needed to write it. I addressed it, "To the future Julian. You're enough. You always were." I folded the page and tucked it inside the back of my journal. No more battles to fight, only gardens to grow in the space I reclaimed. I walked into the lobby that morning holding the folder of evidence tight against my side. Lobby quiet, air conditioning humming low overhead, clocks pointing to 10. I had been here before, arrived early, papers in hand, heart standing sentinel, but never like this, never certain. I flash back to meetings last fall when I noticed my name missing on reports, ideas I'd pitched, drafts I'd stayed late writing, yet somehow erased in the final version. Theo smiling as if he owned them, Brian nodding, hands folded. I pause in the hallway, watching Theo prepping for his presentation, Clicker in hand, slides under his thumb. Brian stops by, offers a forced smile. "Big presentation today, huh?" he says. I nod back. Inside, I breathe out a steady promise. This is the moment I prepared for. The conference room filled, clients seated, colleagues shifting. Theo began speaking, presentation bright, welcoming applause. I watched until slide 5 appeared. Data I developed, branding I designed, without credit. I rose, walked to the front. Silence followed. "If I may," I said, "slide 5 includes data I developed and branded under my name." Heart skipped in the room. I pulled up the original draft, timestamps, version history, builds and layouts. It was all there, my fingerprints on every margin. Gasps. Theo stuttered. Brian's face flushed. Recognition streamed across people's faces. Shock, guilt, admiration. The truth hung heavier than any fake applause. I stood calm and contained, because I wasn't questioning anymore. I was claiming. After the presentation, I opened the photo on my phone. The neighbor's doorbell camera caught Theo backstage at my backyard court, laughing with friends, mocking Julian trying to shoot. I held Julian's hand in front of everyone. "This is the kind of fun he thought was private," I said. Every face shifted. The room stretched silent. Betrayal wasn't just public theft of work, it was emotional theft too. Stealing dignity, confidence, trust, all behind closed doors. Clients murmured. Heads nodded. I didn't shout. I didn't stomp out. I let the quiet weight of truth settle. Brian tried to pass it off. I didn't see that. But people now looked toward me for answers. A senior client came to me after. "Thank you for your courage. We'll review contracts," she said softly. Theo's voice trembled. His defenders seemed to shrink. I drafted Theo a termination letter, effective immediately. CC, board, CC, legal. Every privilege revoked, access removed. Julian watched from the doorway, eyes wide. He came over, hugged me. He said, "Mom, thanks for always seeing me." I held him tight. Something inside me flickered, like hope I thought was burnt had a chance to glow again. Victory didn't taste sweet. It tasted like relief, like reclamation, like breathing after years underwater. But scars, they stay. And I know this won't erase what's been done. It won't erase every disappointment, every erased moment. But I closed a door today, opened a future, and that difference, joy and ache both, settled inside me. I replayed dinner in my head again. Every glance, every laugh, every pause. The way Brian avoided my eyes when I asked Julian if he was okay. The way Belle smoothly changed the subject when the room felt like it was about to crack. I could almost taste the distance. I felt my pulse run faster, not anger yet. Just the kind of frustration that settles in your chest when things unspoken are piling up. 2 days later, I sat in my home office, papers spread out, the lamp low. Theo's text, Belle's dismissals, Jane's offhand comments. I found a message Belle sent in the group chat months ago. "Your daughter will grow up, won't let that become weight." She thought she was being kind. I felt it as a weight. Every insult I've tolerated, every joke hidden in concern. I logged names, times, what was said. I built a document I called Julian's Shield. From that, a pattern emerged, not excuses, but offenses disguised as care. Silence enforced by smiles, apologies never made. Sympathy never offered. That night, I decided something had to change. I told Julian, "Let's pick out clothes tomorrow he won't mock." I didn't expect him to understand what I was doing, but he nodded, his face serious. Then I messaged Jane privately. I asked her to ask Theo to stop. I wrote it out. I imagined a conversation where I wouldn't have to beg. When she replied, "You're making it bigger than it is," I felt something inside me shift. The dismissals were not going to be brushed aside anymore. When I hung up the phone, I was quieter than ever before. But inside, I felt more alive. I sat at the window facing Julian's bedroom, his silhouette framed by half-open blinds. I watched his back as he read before sleep. I thought about the many times I stayed silent to keep harmony, to be the peacekeeper, to avoid trouble. I realize now, peace built on erasure is still violence. Early the next morning, I drafted an email to Theo. Not accusatory, not loud, just firm. I attached screenshots. Theo's original message, Belle's text. I CC'd Jane and Brian. Transparency became my weapon. I didn't expect an immediate apology. I expected context, a denial, whatever. It didn't matter so much as the fact that I did it. Theo replied, "My words were taken out of context. No apology, nothing real, just words shaped to avoid real accountability." I felt a tremor in my chest as I read it. It wasn't betrayal anymore. It was clarity. I knew where I stood. I knew what I wouldn't accept anymore. That evening, I sat by Julian's bed. He was reading a book. I held his hand. Warm, soft. I told him, "I'm sorry you felt invisible today." He didn't say anything, but he squeezed my hand. A pact. I promised him I would try harder. Not for show, for real. I slept less than I had hoped. But something was different. I wasn't shrinking back anymore. I wasn't disappearing in the background. For the first time in a long time, I felt the echo of my voice might carry. Morning light filtered in through our kitchen window. Julian was already up, cereal in hand, brow furrowed, not at the milk spill, but because the tension was still thick. I sat across from him, taking in the calm before the storm. I made sure my hands were still before I spoke. Brian poured coffee like nothing had changed. He asked quietly, "You okay now?" I nodded. "I'm clear. That's different from okay." He shrugged and left it at that. No apology, no acknowledgement beyond the polite question. But the way he avoided eye contact, that was enough. I noted it, stored it inside where hurt builds up if unchecked. A phrase came to mind, something I heard at a workshop last year. A fake apology is just another way to silence you. And in that moment, I realized I hadn't wanted an apology. I wanted recognition. I wanted boundaries. That night, Julian showed me a video on his tablet. Theo at a backyard party, mocking someone attempting a three-point shot, then saying he'd trip before the shot. Julian paused the clip, looked at me. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" Kneeling beside him, I held his hand. "No. And no one gets to say you don't belong." I forwarded the video to myself. Saved it. More evidence. Hurt turned to something sharper. Focus. This isn't about revenge. It's about raising a boy who never has to recover from this. After I dropped Julian off at school, I returned to the kitchen where Brian was already making his second cup. I sat, my folder of documentation in front of me. "If you need me to explain why this is serious, then maybe I've been explaining too much all along," I said. Brian shook his head. "You're making more than you need to." Pattern. Dismissal. Excuses. I laid the folder down. In it, text screenshots, video clip, old emails where I flagged discomfort. "I've documented 12 incidents. That's not misunderstanding." That's a pattern. My voice steady. I gave him a simple choice. Either you set a boundary with your brother, or I will, with legal and business consequences. No shouting, just line drawn. Later, I called my lawyer, asked about contract violations, prepared for pushback from him and Brian, documented everything. I reached out to HR where I used to have connections, checked confidentiality, took notes in my journal, named things that had just been shadows before. I felt drained, my throat tight, but also lighter, because I was no longer pretending his actions were about harmless remarks. A mentor once told me, "Silence isn't strength, it's sometimes fear dressed in patience." I thought of her words while standing in Julian's backyard at dusk, watching him bounce a basketball alone, practicing, trying, not caring if he missed. My fear had left the building. I showed up to work early that evening. The offices were quiet, lights dimmed in the hall, windows fogged from the cool air outside. My briefcase felt heavy with papers I'd printed, drafts, timestamps, original files with my name clearly marked. I paused before entering the conference room where the internal review meeting was about to begin. I saw the slide up on the screen. Co-lead, Theo Caldwell. My stomach dropped. That familiar erasure stung worse now. When people started filing in, I forced myself to stand tall. I couldn't stomach pretending anymore. I crossed to my desk and laid out the documents I had, email chains that showed I was the author, design drafts nobody else touched. My palms were steady. My heart pounded enough for me to hear it, but my voice wouldn't shake. The meeting began. Theo stood at the front, talking through the presentation, my ideas, my late nights, like they belonged to him. I watched colleagues nodding, some leaning forward as if Theo had always been the lead. At slide 3, something snapped inside me. I raised my hand while he paused, mid-sentence. "Excuse me," I said, soft but firm. "I'd like to clarify something about slide 3. People turned. Brian's face tightened. Theo's expression faltered. I pulled up the original document on my laptop, opened version history. Dates, edits, notes and margins. All mine. This section was drafted last November. These margins, this layout, my work. The room stilled. Eyes dropped. Theo stumbled, cleared his throat. "I thought we agreed to share credit." "No," I said. "Credit shared is mutual. Pretending I didn't do the work is theft." A mentor from HR, a woman I look up to, leaned back and murmured, "You did the right thing. It's time people saw you." I felt her words like fuel, not triumph, clarity, something I deserved. That night, after everyone left, I drafted an email to the team and CC'd the supervisors. Subject: Project Roles Responsibilities. I attached screenshots of version history, drafts, timestamps. Clean, clear. I pressed send. Theo complained behind closed doors later, said I was overreacting, but now there was a record, and for once, the story couldn't be rewritten without everything showing up on screen. Brian texted me before bed. "You could have handled it differently." I read it and didn't reply. I already had clarity that protecting self-respect sometimes means making noise people wish you didn't. Despite adrenaline, sleep finally found me. My phone off the nightstand, my heart still but firm. Silence wasn't an option anymore. 2 evenings passed since I set that line, and tonight I sat in the back of the room at the charity banquet, chest tight with what I already suspected, Theo's name up on the banner. Lead community partner, it read. My name? Missing. The event was ours, my business, my ideas, my late nights, but something had been taken, not just by Theo, by Brian. I felt that sharp betrayal, like I'd given trust and gotten erasure in return. Brian stood at the podium introducing Theo. The audience clapped. I stayed seated, stunned, polite. A neighbor leaned over. "Thought this was your project?" I nodded, but let no words form. My throat burned, pride fluttered like a wounded bird. It hurt that Brian didn't look at me, that he found it easier to let Theo take credit than to tell the truth. During intermission, I approached Brian. He looked at the flyer in my hand, saw the omission, and froze. He said, "It was just easier to let him handle it tonight." Easier? For whom? For his peace? Or my invisibility, I asked. Easier for you to avoid the truth, or for me to disappear? He stammered excuses, looked away. The betrayal felt louder than any insult, because it wasn't only about Theo anymore. This was about Brian choosing belonging to his brother over defending what is right. When the program resumed, I rose. Heart hammering, I asked for the mic. Speech ready in my head, words sharp but controlled. This project began in my garage, built with sweat and vision. Mine. Faces froze. Theo's smile faltered. Brian's skin went pale. I didn't shout. I let the evidence speak. Stories in files, designs and invoices, nights of work nobody saw. I finished with something I'd practiced. Silence is the last privilege I'm surrendering. Afterwards, someone from the back asked if I'd speak more on this. A local reporter approached, looked me in the eye. "Thank you." I nodded. I thanked back. That night, I revoked Theo's admin access from company systems, his permissions gone. I emailed our advisory board, updated leadership protocols, set clear accountability. For the first time, I felt the power of my own voice. Brian sent a text later. I didn't realize it was that bad. I read it. I didn't respond. I slept without glancing at my phone. Let that be the end of living for their expectance.